Hey there, welcome to Tuning In. My name is Michael Curtis, and this is the podcast where I help everyday audio techs level up so they can get amazing results, scary good sound out of their shows and services. And I'm excited to launch a new series. It is a live audio explain and explain it like I'm five ultra fundamentals series of all the questions you might have been afraid to ask if you've been doing this for a while, or if you're completely new, welcome. And we're going to start from ground zero and make sure you are on the same page, that you have all the lingo, that you're familiar with live sound. So hope these are just a series of podcasts you can just pepper in and hammer through that'll really get you some of the key concepts solidified in your brain. So when you then step behind a console, you feel much more comfortable. First up, we have, what in the world does a live audio tech do? Ultimately, we are responsible for what the audience hears and experiences throughout a live event. So we have recorded sound, so that's in a very controlled environment where the actual deliverable or outcome is a recording to experience later. That's all well and good, but specifically we're talking about live sound. This is a real-time event that is happening with either an in-person audience or a remote audience, someone viewing it elsewhere. So the Super Bowl, there are people inside the Super Bowl wherever it's being held there, and then folks getting it broadcasted and watching it elsewhere. Obviously, there's a video element, but there's someone actually mixing the audio to make sure what's happening on the field, the referees, the announcers, the crowd mics, everything is being piped out through the broadcast. So all that to say, our biggest, highest level goals, we are responsible that making sure every single participant is able to hear. Again, that's no matter if it's a rock band, an 8-person discussion panel, a DJ set, a theater performance, a church service, whatever it is, we are responsible for what everyone hears. So what happened way back when, before we had electricity and speakers and all this technology available to us, is folks had to rely on acoustic sound only. So if you wanted to hear a concert, go see Mozart, you had to be in that room. There was a piano or well-tempered clavier, if you will, playing, and the actual sound emanating from the voice or the instrument that was in the room, that's all there was. So as shows and audiences got bigger and more people wanted to hear it, we needed to figure out a way to reinforce. So with that, I use that term very intentionally because one of the seminal books you should definitely get is the Yamaha Sound Reinforcement Manual. That's how our craft originated, is we're merely reinforcing what is happening on stage so that a bigger and larger audience can experience what's happening without having to be so close and so intimate to the acoustic sound. Because sound is highly directional, so if we have two actors on stage facing each other, talking to each other, they're going to be able to hear each other, but someone maybe towards that person's back on the other side, it makes it hard. So we want to basically extrapolate or capture the sound that's happening on stage and then put it through a system that could then project it again out to everyone else, whether that's an in-room or remote audience. So we use technology like microphones that capture sound, like mixing consoles that then aggregate all those sources from whether it's a vocal, a guitar, a lavalier microphone, a DJ output of their mixer that's coming into our mixer. We mix them all together and we combine it into a feed or an output that then goes to our speaker system, which then projects it out. So capturing, managing, and mixing and projecting is kind of this 3-part tier that I like to think of. So what does pulling this off look like? So we know high level why it's needed, what's happening, what are the 3 main components, but what does it actually look like for an audio tech on site? So you may be responsible, if this is a smaller gig and you're doing it all yourself, you're a 1-person crew, you would be setting up the microphones. Let's call it a 4-piece or 4-person band that's playing for a nonprofit gala, and then there's one person on a podium. What would that look like? Let's see what it looks like in a real life scenario. You would bring the gear, assuming that the venue does not have a sound system. You would set up mic stands and microphones for the couple of vocalists. You might put a microphone in front of the guitar amp. You would also put microphones on the drum set. So those are all devices that are capturing the sound. You might also set up a speaker system for the audience. This is usually just a couple of speakers on sticks is the colloquial way to call it. A very popular one is the QSC K12. You put it up and you point the speakers at the people. And then you at the back of the room, likely, or even right next to the stage, depending on how you can set things up, you would set up an audio console that then would capture all those microphones, maybe also the podium microphone on the stage. Maybe there's a iPhone that's coming into your audio console that's playing a walk-in music playlist. Those are all going there, and that's being sent out to the speaker system for everyone to hear. And then those musicians on stage might also have a monitor in front of them, or a wedge, as sometimes it's called. That is another speaker that sits in front of them that is then able to play back themselves so they can hear themselves and the other band members. So you're responsible for bringing in the gear, setting it up in accordance with what the band has given you, and they never give you the accurate information for some reason. I say never, but rarely. And maybe there's a last minute ask to have an extra microphone for someone to give a toast, and like, oh, that's a wireless microphone. So that's pretty cool that we can actually have audio transmit over the air. So you're responsible for making sure all these things work, that they're coordinated together, that the levels are right, that everyone can hear, the band can hear, the audience can hear, and then they might ask for a recording of it. So you have to figure out how to get good record levels. So all that in just a small nonprofit and a small band gig, you are responsible for it. All right. So we were capturing the inputs or the sources from the band. We were capturing it from someone that's on stage. We were sending it to the audience via a speaker system. We also are sending it to the band so they can hear themselves. And we might be sending it to a recorder or even a live stream at the same time. And you, as an audio tech, are responsible for all of it and putting that together and being comfortable with how all that is connected, that is signal flow, how they manage levels in between them, how it sounds. And then during the actual event, you are mixing it. So when the band is playing, you're making sure they are heard and not the podium microphone. When the band stops, you are muting or removing those microphones from your mix, and then only making sure that podium microphone is being sent out. So that is the active part during the show. And we're using tools on the audio desk to shape the sound of each of those sources so that they sound their best. So capturing, managing, mixing, and then projecting it out. So on much larger shows, we are dividing that role into smaller sub roles because one person can't do everything on a show of a huge scope. So I'm going to just rattle through a bunch of different sub roles that are within an audio tech scope. So first out, we've talked about it, is a front of house mixer. So front of house is the fancy term for what happens where everyone lives out in the audience, the technical folks there. This is usually the lighting director, maybe the show caller, most often the audio tech who is mixing the show. You're actively responsible for just what the audience is hearing. And of course, you need to be out with your equipment out in the audience so you can hear what's going on. So this is live bands and tours. This is theater. This might be for a corporate gig. So not only are there specializations for I am just doing the house mix or what the front of house mix is just for the audience, but there's different verticals of I am attached to a specific artist. I'm attached to a specific venue. I only do corporate or high profile political events. So this can further trickle down into specialties. Second is a monitor mixer. So a person dedicated completely to just mixing monitors for talent, and talent meaning a performer of some sort. So it gets crazy where sometimes really high profile acts have a monitor mixer for the band, and there's just a dedicated monitor mixer just mixing for what the principal or lead performer is to make sure they can hear exactly what they need to at any given time. And it's not only just on these speakers in front of them, these monitor wedges, but there's also in-ear mixes, which means they're putting in headphones that are usually on a wireless pack that they can hear so they can walk around wherever and is the same mix. And it's less cabling, simplicity, all that. Number 3 is a broadcast mixer. So you're responsible for making sure it sounds great for everyone else who's not in the room, for it being recorded later and folks viewing it live. So if you watch we're coming off the heels of this last presidential debate. It was someone's job to make sure they had the microphones on each of the candidate stands and the moderator's microphones coming into their mixing console, being in a broadcast truck and sent out to something that's matching it up with the video feed and going out. Maybe you're mixing your church's live stream. You can be doing front of house and broadcast at the same time, and there's ways to do that. But if you want the absolute best results and have the resources to do so, having 2 separate people do it to make sure it sounds great for the room and the broadcast is essential. Number 4 is a system engineer. And this is someone who's responsible for the sound system itself. So they're designing it, they're deploying it, they're tuning it, basically verifying that it's sounding great and making sure it sounds as best it can in every seat. They would be handing off the best canvas possible to the front of house engineer to be able to mix on. So if they can trust, I've heard it said before by another engineer that the mix engineer says, I'll make it sound good right here, AKA at my mix position. The system engineer is responsible for making sure it sounds good everywhere else. So that a good system engineer is going to be able to do that. And the show's scope, the gear available, is the particular Rubik's Cube that they're solving to make sure it sounds good. There's also a recording tech. So that maybe this is a live concert that's supposed to be recorded and then mixed down later to be paired up with maybe a video or YouTube video that's going to be pushed out. So you might have someone who's specifically responsible to make sure it is captured well to be mixed down later by a studio engineer. There's also an audio playback op. So that's someone, if you've heard maybe on Jimmy Fallon, he makes a joke and then you hear a really fun, like glass breaking or weird sound coming. There's someone who's aggregating all those sounds and making sure they're played at the right time. Or you're at a corporate event and it says, ladies and gentlemen, the leader of the free world, or whatever they're saying their title is. Someone had to record those, curate them, put them in a software, and I call them spacebar heroes because you usually hit spacebar and it plays that out. And sometimes there's a walk-on track. So an audio playback op is just responsible for that. Then there's an RF tech or coordinator. So they are responsible for RF, radio frequencies, all the wireless that's happening. And so we have to fit a wireless microphone, maybe a wireless guitar pack or a wireless in-ear pack. Has to fit within the spectrum and be coordinated as such for it to not get dropouts or losing the signal or it to get scratchy sounding. So an RF tech is setting up all that gear, figuring out a way to set up all their antennas to make sure it's all captured and transmitted the correct way, and that it all fits within the given spectrum available. It is a little bit easier to coordinate here in Arkansas than it is in Washington, D.C., for instance, since there's much less traffic. So you want a really skilled RF coordinator if you're in a high density or high RF traffic area with a bunch of TV stations and cell phones and all that. They have to coordinate around it. So it takes a lot of know-how to do that well. Next is a comms tech. So on a show, if you're wearing a headset and be able to talk to your crew, you're using comm or communications. So this person is responsible for making sure whether it's someone on a camera, the video director, the A2 managing wireless and lavaliers on a corporate show, or the front house engineer, or the show caller, all can hear each other and talk to their respective parties. And someone might ask, hey, I just want a separate channel to be able to just talk to the lighting department or just the audio department. The comms tech would set that up. Sometimes there's crews in multiple time zones and they're using tools like Unity to be able to have a local comm set go up into the cloud or whatever and talk to someone else across the world at the same time. So someone has to be responsible for stitching that all together, and that's a comms tech. We got two more. So a stage patch manager. So that's usually someone in a tour situation or a festival circuit. When they're switching bands, they have to get a band's gear off and back on, and they're connecting all those signals back to the monitor console and the front of house console to make sure that the artist is ready to go. So they're managing all the cables, inputs and outputs, aka sources and destinations that are involved with that act. And lastly, the most general is an audio stagehand. So you might show up to a bigger show and they say, hey, I need 5 hands to go with audio. You're responsible for helping the audio department deploy their gear, push their cases, maybe help get their PA or sound system up in the air. And that is what an audio hand might do. Okay, so let's land the plane here. So if you're like, this all sounds really cool, I'm interested in this, what skills should you start developing? So I have another video on the channel called 7 Must-Have Skill Sets of a World-Class Live Audio Engineer, and this will give you 7 different buckets to start thinking about, and I'll share these here. You need rock-solid fundamentals. So what I'm going to be covering here in these later video podcasts is a lot of those fundamentals that you need to be able to have in your brain and have experience to do it. You need musical mixing abilities. You need sound system sense to be able to deploy the system great. You need to be a ninja RF, comm, and stage tech, so to be able to be comfortable in each of those environments. You need stellar soft skills, because oftentimes you'll be working with clients and you have to tell them no politely if they ask to do something, or work with a band that's maybe a little bit of a diva. You need a sharp production intuition. It's one thing to know our skill sets within audio, but another to see yourself within the context of an entire show or production or service and be able to talk in between departments. And if you want to do this as a career, you need a disciplined, patient business mind to couch your skills, be able to market them ethically, to get gigs, to know how to run your money and not run out of it, how to charge appropriately. So again, it's one thing to be good, but we live, at least here in America, in a free market. We need to know how to charge for what's happening and figure out how to provide for ourselves and our families and do that well. All right, there's a very high-level overview of what it means to be an audio tech on any given show. My name is Michael Curtis. I love helping you get amazing results out of your shows and services. I'll catch you next time.